Carter color, make it perfect. Carter color, make it perfect.
Mental Coffee Peace and War Times. This is part 5 of Atonism, Ankhenaten, His Spirit, and Young Pharaoh, part 5. The videos we just listened to gives us a few takeaways. 1. Akhenaten's name used to be called Amenhotep. Amen was connected to Amen-Ra, the chief sun god. 2. His father gave honor to Aten. 3. Akhenaten changed Aten's old form of description into a new description from just a solar disk to a solar disk with rays shining down, with a snake and Ankh coming to Earth with no human or animal body. It's a picture of Ankhenaten and Nefertiti with their kids, with the solar disk and the rays coming down. And here you see one with the serpent. We'll get into that later. Listen to reason. Moreover, the opposites, the circle and line powers or whip powers, are one reason the pharaohs of Egypt wore headgear, crown, or uraeus decorated with the sun disk, rounded circle, and the serpent, the hajib, curved or straight line. These united but opposite powers are also symbolized by the Ethiopian Egyptian Ankh of ancient times. Another reason is, like all other original gods and goddesses of the universe, one of the attributes of the sun god is the serpent, the whip of the uraeus, as explained in Introduction Book 1 of the Science Noon, written by Afro Unu, as this book is too. Still another reason why the pharaohs of the Sudan, Egypt, and Ethiopia and Africa wore the uraeus, the sun disk, and the serpent crown is this: it was a sign of fearful and fearlessness, powers, godhood, priesthood, kinghood, sovereignty, and the ability and capacity to do good or evil, like all the original gods and goddesses of eternal nature. Let it be remembered always, and let it be known. Introduction to the Nature, Book 2, page 23. Character overview. Aten, pronounced Aten, was an ancient Egyptian god who was worshipped during the reign of the Pharaoh or Egyptian king Ankhenaten in the 18th dynasty or 1350s to 1330s BC. Unlike earlier pharaohs who had worshipped many gods, Ankhenaten claimed that Aten was the one supreme god. This may have been the earliest example of monotheism, or the belief in a single god as opposed to many gods, in the ancient Near East. Aten was the sun disk, once an aspect of Ra. As much older Egyptian deity, Aten is described as the giver of life, and as both male and female. Much of what is known about Aten worship comes from the great hymn to the Aten, a joyful poem inscribed on the walls of ancient tombs in Amarna, which is located on the walls of ancient tombs at Amarna, which is located on the east bank of the Nile River in Egypt. The hymn, whose authorship is attributed to Pharaoh Akhenaten himself, describes Aten as the only one supreme being and creator. It says that Akhenaten and his wife Queen Nefertiti are the only people capable of understanding the god and expressing his wishes. The hymn speaks of Aten as a loving god who brings order and beauty to the world. Aten was the sun disk, once an aspect of Ra, a much older Egyptian deity in part. Let's define the word aspect. Late 14th century, an astrological term, relative position of the planets as they appear from the earth. how they look at one another, also one of the ways of viewing something, from Latin aspectus, a seeing, looking at, sight, view, countenance, appearance, from past participle, as aspicia, to look at, look upon, behold, observe, examine, figuratively consider, ponder from, to speciere, to look from, post-Indo-European root, spec, to observe. Listen to sound right, cosmic reason. Let's relook at the statement, Aten was the sun disk, once an aspect of Ra, a much older Egyptian deity in part. It is clear that Aten and Ra are two separate deities, and that Aten was another name of a much older deity, older Egyptian deity as stated. In mundane science, this will be called astrology, which is the study of everything outside planet Earth. The question is, what orb is being referred to as Aten? The sun has been identified as Ra. The earth is already understood because Ankhenaten and others before him said Aten was in the sky. Judging by these pictures, what object is closest to the planet Earth? Alright, so we see this is the Aten, and the pictures is here, so it's understood that this is on Earth because we are on Earth. We're observing this monument on Earth, giving depiction and drawn to something in the sky. Alright, so Aten appearance, a sun disk with rays which end in hands. Aten was a form of the sun god Ra. During the reign of Ankhenaten, the Aten was made the king of the gods. Alright, now here we have a picture of, I think it's called a flower moon, and this is when the moon is this close to the earth. It's almost like as if you could touch it. So we can see from deductive reasoning that the moon is the only object left to consider. The moon also reflects the sun's rays as deceptively depicted in Ankhenaten's images. So here you can see the sunlight hit the moon and it come down. Look. And you can see the same picture, same image. So they had to know about the rays of the sun bouncing off the moon in such an intricate way. Why? Because our ancestors knew. Our ancestors came from the sun. I got books on our hair and videos on my YouTube that explains this. So we taught these Arab invaders back then about the heavens. Alright, but look at that. It's no coincidence. Same position. You can't make this up. Here's the gematria showing how the Egyptian word for the moon and the word Aten are numerically aligned. Alright, you got the word cons for moon, comes out to 68 and 23. Aten comes out to 68 and 23. Khonsu, ancient Egyptian, Hinsu, also translated as Chansu, Kensu, Khons, or Khonshu. These are names for the moon. This also goes for the word satellite and the word Aten. Khons is 67. The satellite moon come out to 67. Now that this writer has made his points, let's now look at the writings of Amenubi Rakapatar, also known as Afro-Unu, about this Aten mythology, which is actually a scientific reality in astrology and noon science. 6 ether is 9 ether in death. To put it another way, when 9 ether dies, it becomes 6 ether, as stated in count 1 of the booklets, The 9 Ball. 9 ether is the completed combination of all existing gases and chemicals, and there can be nothing more powerful. That is why 9 ether is the original creator or grower in Ethiopian culture. Creation means growth. Therefore, 6 ether is the reverse formula of 9 ether. 9 ether is the formulation of life, and 6 ether is the formula of death. And this means that the original life-giving gases and chemicals in 9 ether dissipate and lessen to the point of ineffectiveness, and this marks the death of 9 ether, the true Ethiopian forces in nature. then evolution begins in force like a body gets cold and starts to decay at death. An example of 9 ether is doing the top half instead of 1 hydrogen and 2 oxygen like now, it's 9 hydrogen and 9 oxygen. When 6 ether came into being, which is the death of 9 ether, the 9 elements of peace, 18 in all, went through radioactive decay and became 6 hydrogen and 6 oxygen. Of course, those elements have deteriorated to 1 hydrogen and 2 oxygen today. However, Nupu is reversing this process as we Nupu are typing this message. Remember this well. 6 ether is the forces of evolution, and these forces are the zodiac called Leviathan, dragon, and serpent in the Caucasian Bible. 6 ether controls and rules during the evolutionary cycle on the earth by way of the moon. The evolutionary cycle is the cycle of death in the universe, and it covers an 18 million year period. After this period of time, evolution reverses and mankind revolves back to monkey, and the evolutionary Ethiopian revolves back to pygmy. 6 ether is the energy of the universe when the universe is dead, and that is in its death cycle. When the prominence of 6 ether breaks forth from the sun at the death of the universe and reaches the earth's magnetic field, it interferes with the earth and the moon in their living courses, and the great deluge on earth called Noah's flood takes place. The moon, which is a living universal body, at that time, the beginning of evolution, stops turning on its own axis and thereby becomes waterless, by which means it becomes a dead universal body that converts 6 ether from the sun to deeper and greater negative forces, which is development of evolution until it reaches its climax and ghost in the Caucasian race. End quote in part. 9 ball count 2, number 37 through 38 in part. 6 ether energies are gamma rays, waves, radiation, and mundane science that bounces off the moon to earth. Surprise, the moon outshines the sun at its highest energies. This is written in 2023. If you look at all the objects in Earth's skies, both natural and artificial, it should come as no surprise that the sun is the brightest object of all. The sun, after all, produces its own light, powered by nuclear fusion in its core. That core generating energy not only holds the sun up against gravitational collapse, but also propagates to the sun's edge of the photosphere, where the sun emits radiation over a wide range of wavelengths that correspond to a temperature of around 6,000 K. Although the moon is the second brightest object that we see, it's only so bright because of its very close proximity to Earth. Most of the moon's light intrinsically is just reflected light from the sun. Alright? Surprise, the moon outshines the sun at its highest energies. Across all wavelengths of light, the light of the sun is brighter than the moon until we went to the highest energies and saw a gamma ray surprise. Although this was first shown to be true in a visible wavelength of light, the 20th century revealed that the same circumstances held for a wide variety of other wavelengths. The sun was the brightest object, followed distantly by the moon in second place as seen from the earth, and X-rays, ultraviolet light, visible light, infrared light, and radio light, with other planets, stars, and galaxies trailing far behind the two. But when we began looking at the sky at the shortest, highest energy wavelengths, we realized this picture was no longer universally true. The sun emits practically no gamma rays, but the moon emits copious amounts of them. Here's the science of why. As seen in X-rays against the cosmic background, the moon's illuminated bright and non-illuminated portions darker, clearly visible in this early X-ray image taken by Rosat. The X-rays emitted from the moon, like almost all wavelengths of light, with the notable exception of gamma rays, arise mostly from reflected emission from the sun. So this is a picture of the moon under X-ray. So you can see all this gamma radiation, gamma rays, and all that bouncing off the moon coming to the earth is light. X-rays showing the gamma rays that are coming from the moon that show this bright side. Listen to sound ray cosmic reason. This is what Ankhenaten was holding his hands up to in reality. Another point to consider is that Ankhenaten was against sun worship because he was possessed by the moon and Tahuti, and they caused Ankhenaten to go against the sun god Jutar, Jupiter, Ma'at, Amun-Ra, and the sun spirit god Horus, and these battles occurred between these two orbs in 6,000 year sun cycles and moon cycles, both which last 6,000 years apiece. The moon cycle ended February 5th, 1962, and the sun cycle began. That's why Ankhenaten started attacking the solar cult the way he did. Here is an example of this spoken of in Introduction to the Nature of Nature. The sun god Amun-Ra, Re Harakti, was replaced by the god Horus as the celestial firepower, and thereby one of the mountains of Moses was called Horeb. Mountain of Moses was called Horeb, meaning mountain of the sun. The sun god Horus is the mythological son of Osiris, Pluto, according to legend. Therefore, the sun god Re Harakti of the Ethiopian race had to fade into the background and become known as Horus, the son of Osiris, because the moon god Sin Mercury, the traditional messenger of the gods, had taken over spiritual leadership for the first 4,000 years of the moon cycle, and Osiris, who was active alongside the moon god, took over spirit leadership for the last 2,000 years of the moon cycle. Spirit beings can be tricky and elusive. Let it be remembered always and be known. Introduction to the Nature of Nature, Book 2, page 131, in part. This battle between Amun-Ra, the sun, Jupiter, Jutar, Horus, and Tahuti and Osiris began 6,000 years ago from February 5th, 1962 AD, universally when the moon cycle began. However, it took time for Tahuti, as thought to infiltrate his lunar teachings into Kemet. The Phoenicians originally came from Asia and were invaders of Egypt themselves around 3000 BC. Moses was a ruler of Egypt, and his title was Thutmose I. He was the beginning of the Moon Dynasty in Egypt around 1600 BC. Bible Interpretation Explanation, Book 1, number 21, in part, written 1967 AD. Here is the 6,000 year moon cycle breakdown. 6,000 equals year 1 of the moon cycle. That's the first 1,000 years. 4004 BCE by Caucasian religionist James Ussher in Ireland, Archbishop. Alright, this is how he calculated his 6,000 years. Do a little research on him. 4038 BC equals year 1 of the moon cycle. In the Gregorian calendar to the year February 5th, 1962 AD is 6,000 years. During the moon cycle, the moon god Tahuti is the ruler of all activities, plus Tahuti serves as the messenger of the orbs, gods, and all the pantheons, and he is also the angel Gabriel in religions. During the 6,000 year sun cycle, which we're in now, the sun Jupiter Jutar is the ruler of all activities, and Horus Heru gives Tahuti messages, and Horus is the head in all the pantheons. And Heru Horus is the angel Michael in religions. Here's the gematria. Dishahuti is 93. Angel Gabriel is 93. The angel Mike and Horus is all 9s. Because the sun equals 9 is why this sun god's name comes out to 9. Philosophically, the sun and moon are opposites in nature, and this is part of our universe. For the sun represents the living, and the moon symbolizes the dead. The letter by letter number of the sun is 9, and the letter by letter number of the moon is 6 this way. The letter S is the 19th letter of the English alphabet. The letter U is the 21st, and the letter I is the 9th, and the letter N is the 14th letter of the same alphabet. S is 19, U is 21, N is 14. Sun. You add it up, you get 54. 5 plus 4 equals 9. S is 19, I is 9, and N is 14, which is sin. And it comes out to 42. 4 plus 2 equals 6. Sin is an ancient name of the moon. Introduction to the Nature, Book 2, page 108 in part. When the moon dynasty is set up, called the 18th dynasty by Tahuti, it's why the Pharaoh started using Thutmose in their names. This is why mundane archaeologists call this period the Thutmose dynasty. When a pharaoh is incarnated with a spirit god, the Pharaoh take on that spirit god's name, the same as this writer, who has our the orbs names in front of here, such as Jutar. Ju means justice, Ma'at and balance, and Tar or Ptah means black because of his race, and originally all Ethiopians were and are black at the time of his writing. The Thutmose dynasty appears on the moon cycle timeline this way: 6,000 equals year 1 equals first 1,000 years, 5,000 is the second 1,000 years, 4,000 equals the third 1,000 years, 3,000 equals 4,000 years. This is the last 1,000 years to the start of 1 AD. The 18th dynasty came in around the last 1,600 years, or the 4,000 years of Tahuti's reign, before the ending of the 4,000th year. Osiris, Usia began his solo rulership from 2,000 equals the 5,000 year, 1 AD to 1,000 equals 6,000 year, ending February 5th, 1962 AD. In closing, it should be clear that Ankhenaten went from Amenhotep IV, the worship of Amen-Ra Amen, and satisfied the sun, to Ankhenaten, effective for Aten the moon. Now that this is over, humanity has been in the sun cycle 61 years since February 5th, 1962, and Sipu the moon and Jutar a sun are no longer fighting against one another. Let this be known. The moon stopped turning on its own axis and started dragging through space instead of rolling, and thereby became an outstanding opposition to the sun, and increasingly so until the end of the moon cycle, which is at the present time. The present time being at the marking of the year 1962. Let it be remembered, always let it be known. Introduction to the Nature Book 2, page 57 in part. Now that you all have been shown how a moon spirit caused Ankhenaten, an ancient Arab pharaoh, to turn against the priests of Amen-Ra 3,000 plus years ago, that same spirit showed up in young Pharaoh, who used to go by Allah, an Arab deity, was going at it in modern times with a group called the Amen-Ra Squad. Here's the proof. This one, he was going by a young Pharaoh Allah. And now we can watch the videos of him getting into it with the Amen-Ra Squad. Remember, this is what it means when it says that noon science is an ethereal sign, because it also helps you identify the ethereal or the spiritual aspect or the spirit energies that are all major part of what takes place in human beings' lives and person, places, and things. True me to call it peace in wartime.
In an attempt to belittle my research, the references that I put out in the beginning of this video. So I'm going to give them to you again. Now, when you say what tangible evidence have I collected, that's a trick question, because you've never been to Egypt, and Uncle has never been to Egypt. So now, that being said, don't name one of us have no physical tangible evidence. So we're all dealing with book page research when it comes to the ancestors. So I'm dealing with the same evidence you're dealing with it, which is reading books predicated upon the alleged findings and understandings of my ancestors. Now, before I break this down, I'm going to give you the sites again. You've never been to Egypt, but these three authors that I'm going to name have, and one of their names is Sheldon Gosler, another one is Chris Reintges, and the third one is Maria Bintro. And the first one wrote Writing the Egyptian Hieratic. So this is where my understanding on the Hieratic language comes from. The second one wrote Coptic Egyptian Saharic dialect. This is where my understanding on the Coptic text and dialect comes from. And the third one is from hieroglyphics, the writing of ancient Egypt. And this is where my understanding on Demotic text comes from. So now my acquired knowledge predicated upon these three languages come from three factually, scholarly accredited academicians who are professionals and masters in these fields. Now, with that being said, I only use Brother Chancellor Williams' book to give people an understanding on what time frame that I was trying to let them know these languages were manifested. And I only use the coffin text and pyramid text to let people know that the alleged translations of these books have at least a 2,500 year gap, being that the pyramid text was translated in the 5th and 6th dynasties, and that the coffin text was translated during the 11th and 12th dynasties. So please don't try to belittle the research of someone who's been to Egypt and you yourself hasn't for two. Now, let me break down my methodology. The methodology. Once understanding the Demetic text and understanding that the Hieratic text and Coptic text are hybrid languages that were manifested off taking letters from the Demotic text, we can conclude that since the Demotic text is factually been proven and recorded to have 14 incorrect letters out of 29, anything translated out of that is 45 to 50% incorrect. Because if you're dealing with math and ratio, you know that 14 out of 29 of anything being incorrect is from 45 to 50% in ratio. So now, if the Rosetta Stone, which is alleged to be the primary means of the translation of the Meta Neter, the Demetic text on the Rosetta Stone, which is accredited to be the primary medium of which is used to translate the hieroglyphics, is 45 to 50% incorrect, then we can conclude that anything translated through this medium is 45 to 50% incorrect. So there's no way you're going to tell me when we're dealing with, now we have the evidence collected. We know that through these actual scholars who have been to Europe, who have been to Egypt, unlike me, you, or who are masters in the languages of Demetic, Coptic, and Hieratic texts, have factually documented that Demetic text is 45 to 50% incorrect, and that the Rosetta Stone, which is also accredited by scholars, said to be the primary means of use for the transliteration of the Meta Neter, then we can conclude through common sense that 45 to 50% of whatever they allege to have translated was incorrect. Now, why did I bring up Chancellor Williams' book again, if you don't feel satisfied with my answer? Because Chancellor Williams states specifically in his book that during these time periods that the Demetic text, Hieratic text, and Coptic text were manifested, Africans were pushed out of Egypt, and their spirituality, as well as any other things, anything else that had to do with African heritage and culture, was being suppressed. So
So go ahead, brother Unc. The time is 8:17. Let's go.
All right. First of all, we have brothers and sisters on the Amaral squad that has been to Kemet. So that's a default. You know, we're an organization, right? And you know, everybody ain't gotta go to Kemet. First of all, I'm not an Egyptian dude. Second point, he spoke of Chancellor Williams' work, right? What he should have read was The Origin of Writing, right? It's called The Development of Writing on page, I believe, 134. And Chancellor Williams absolutely talks about how the temples were storehouses of Egyptian history. And he gives a lesson on how they was deciphered. So you see, my book actually has been read, and it's falling apart. He got a crispy book. Next point, right? Here's my absolute proof. I'm going to show you a facsimile, a direct copy from the original. What we have here is what? It's called the Atlas, the Illustrated Atlas of the Human Body. And before I get to that, right, I don't know what I'm going to call young brother Pharaoh, and I don't know what I'm going to call brother Seti, because since the hieroglyphics has not been deciphered, then why are they using Egyptian names? I am very, very confused at this point. So I don't know what I'm going to call them brothers. What I will do is this, though. When it comes to the Atlas of the Human Body, right, I'm going to come to a facsimile. There you go. Now, this the white boy saying. Now watch this. You see that? Look at this. And you know what they said? This is the basis of modern medicine. So this is the answer to red pill. Check this out. The basis of modern medicine stands on the shoulder of the decipherment of the African medical text. Point blank. How do we know it's been deciphered? Because we can go to the hospital, right, and use medicine. That's why we know it's been deciphered. Let's go right here. It says the Ibn Smith Papyrus, written in ancient Egyptian script, 1900 BCE. It is the earliest known medical literature, consisting of 48 case histories and describes conditions, diagnoses, and treatments. This is where they get that from. They get this from Africa. Here we go. There's no getting around this. And actually, they have a timetable here. And guess what they have in a timetable? They say at 2650 BCE, I am Hotep. Oh my! He's the physician. And they're using his work, right, in modern medicine. It's right here. Back to the facsimile. Since everybody wants facsimiles, direct copy from the original is right here. Reference. Next, I want to go to Dr. Ben's work, because now I want to know who y'all teachers are. That's all I want to know. I'm tired of the talk and I'm tired of the rhetoric. So let me share my screen right here. Share my screen. We're going to get right to it. Get to the screen. Hold on. Get right to the Rosetta Stone. See what Dr. Ben got to say about this. All right, can y'all see my screen?
Yes, sir.
All right, we see my screen. This is Dr. Ben's work, Black Man and Now and His Family. All right, we're coming to page 282. Okay, the graph reproduction of Rosetta Stone. He says the Rosetta Stone was illegally taken from Egypt by one of Napoleon's army officers in 1799 during the French invasion of Egypt and Africa. It is permanently, it was looted in the British Museum. So we see Dr. Ben here, right, showing you the Rosetta Stone. And guess what? He shows you the Greek, the demonic, and the hieroglyphic. Now let's go to the next page right here. Watch this. Back to the medicine again. This says prescriptions for fertility control. Now, how would Dr. Ben know? It's right here, Planned Parenthood in the Nile in BC time. How would he know this? He says the so-called Eris Papyrus in 1550 BCE, the earliest known fertility control recipe. It says this is one of a compendium of medical inscriptions left by the indigenous Africans of the Nile Valley. Murray, Ta-Nehisi, right? Monroe. It say it is a prescription for a medical tampon designated to prevent pregnancy. You know what? I'm not going to keep reading this, but all those listening right now understand that a lot of brothers and sisters is officially in checkmate right now. Why are they in checkmate? Because this is the great Dr. Ben's work. Dr. Ben is showing you this. Now, why would Dr. Ben lie to us? Why would Dr. Ben make that up? Why would he act like things have been translated that hasn't been translated? Very, very interesting.
Time up. Time.
Point that I wanted to make. Pharaoh doesn't know the real deal because that person is possessed by Ankhenaten, the spirit of Ankhenaten, and that person is all over the place. You understand? And that's all. And that's why I don't attack him. It's no different if you knew somebody who was possessed in the crazy house, running around on the streets, and other people is laughing and picking at him, but you know what's wrong with him. You're not gonna take the same stance. That's why I can't take the same stance, because I understand scientifically and spiritually what happened to him, and that spirit is trying to complete something it couldn't complete 3,000 years ago. Or however long it was that spirit was in the body, trying to take the direction of Kemet down the moon cycle path, but it didn't hit its peak until Rome got started. But that would be the start from that point. As far as that's when the Moon Dynasty will start, got its foothold in Kemet in the 18th dynasty. But most of these people who's dealing with Kemet, whether they Egyptology or not, they don't possess the spiritual aspect of it. They don't have nine reason to explain what was going on outside of what people are finding in these books or on the walls. You understand? Like me and you can write. We got a lot of spiritual writings in the daytime. You fast forward 3,000 years and people find these writings, but because they don't have the spiritual reasonability, they're only gonna read the information and only gonna lead and just get whatever they get out of it for face value. Meaning, when they translated the hieroglyphs, the spirituality didn't come with it. They just able to decode it, but they don't know that each glyph has a spiritual representation and a physical representation and a scientific representation. And I touched on that a little bit when they said how did they build the pyramids, and I gave y'all a clue by saying the B on the glyphs that represented the Pharaoh represented the vibration and how bees able to hum and able to create this force field around themselves, and they can move things. And the Pharaoh had the power and knew how to tap into the vibration of the planet to help move those blocks. And I gave the example like Professor Xavier on the X-Men.
Oh, okay.
The mind thing with the spirit working with tandem with the planet Earth, Gertha or Geb. They didn't say Geb, the Earth God, was a god for nothing. That was not myth. When they say Geb does this and does that, just because they didn't understand it, they law Geb them under what? Mythology. When you read about Osiris and them, they say, oh, the myth. That's not a myth.
Okay.
They just don't understand the spirituality of it. But when you, in this day and time, they'll tell you that Christ and Allah and all that, those old spirits are alive and making movements in this world. But we only understand it because we're here. But when you look back in the past, it's the same principle. The names are different and the expressions are different. And the spirit forces work with the time and cycle and season, which is what? Mostly what? Digital. People are not spiritual, they're digital. And if you don't understand and how to separate, okay, I know what spirituality is because I know what a spirit is. What is a spirit? Spirits are what? Conscious gases. That's what a spirit is. And once you understand that, your approach is different. Your perspective is different.
Oh, okay. All right. Yeah.
From the pretenses of spirituality, like for example, you see the mayat on my neck. The mayat got wings. A woman is supposed to protect a man. Isis is symbolic to a vulture because a vulture is one of the only animals. If they
that right there.
Yeah, I've never heard that.
No. The reason why Mayat have wings, because wings represent spirit beings because they float in the air at all times, and the planets float in the air at all times. That's what the wings are for, because the planets, the Ennead, the Pasajet, they float around in space. Remember, these orbs are conscious. These are God.
The vulture part.
So that's what the bird represents. The same way, if he was a Christian and he had the dove tatted on his neck, which the dove represent what? Christ and God and all that in Christianity.
The Holy Spirit.
Right, the Holy what? Spirit. And the spirit is a gas, and it's what? Symbolically the same as a bird. Because the bird floats, you can't see how it floats. The same thing with a spirit. You don't know how it moves, but it moves.
Yeah.
So the wings represent
flight.
Forces. Huh?
It represents flight too.
Right, and flight. All of that is dealing with spirits and the planets and how they move and how they control spirit forces from their mind center to the earth, and use water or blood to create a spirit being from brain concentration, and they control human beings. That's what that is. It's not that deep.
See, that's the spirit of a house.
Understand that. Go ahead. That's all I wanted just to clarify. He talking about the female supposed to protect the man. That's a lie. The Pharaoh and the man by nature was designed to protect the female.
It's
the same thing today. That's it. That ain't never changed, even though they tried to alter this.
The female is supposed to protect the child.
There you go. It's the man protect her and the child, and she protect the child. But this is him mixing and matching
information.
That again, that's you looking at how Ankhenaten spirit acted so many years ago.